a good number of people to start us out this morning for today's Mythbusters. Hopefully a subject that's going to be interesting to you. Anything about microphones is always a fascination to me. I kind of have a love of microphones. Hi to Pat, hi to Tom, and everybody else who's tuned in right now. And I hope and can encourage you to really make some commenting during our session here. Even if I don't answer during the session, after or near the end of it, I'll definitely be addressing all of your comments. So stay with us to the end, and I think you'll find today's session kind of interesting too. So let's get into it. Can I do good voiceovers with a USB mic? That's what we want to know. Here's what we'll cover today. USB versus XLR mics, the quality comparisons between the two, customer expectations and how that impacts on your decision, and also a review of one inexpensive USB mic. So that's where we're going today. Let's talk about the whole thing, USB versus XLR. There are two main types of microphones that are used for voiceovers. There are the XLR mics and condenser mics. Those are the two formats, we'll say. Among the different kinds of mics that are available, you can especially find among XLR mics condenser type mics, like the one I'm using here, and dynamic mics, which are the more traditional broadcast type mics. They have a different kind of a pickup, a different kind of a sound, a different distance that you would address them at, and a number of other unique things about them that make them different than condenser mics. Another thing about XLR mics is that they require an interface box. The electronics inside the microphone are not there to convert your voice from analog, which is what we actually live in, the actual analog world, from analog sound into digital. And so that conversion has to happen in order for the voice to get into the computer and for us then to be able to record it and edit it and do all the fancy things we want to do to it. So analog to digital conversion is done externally with an XLR mic through a box. It can be just a straight interface box that just converts analog to digital, or it can also be a preamp that also has some filters and things in it that can change, alter, sweeten, adjust the sound of your microphone. And then there are the USB mics, and those don't have as much to them in terms of what it takes in order for them to be used. They normally are a standalone unit, meaning that they don't need an interface box. They are built with their own circuitry inside them to convert analog into digital, and there is no interface box required as a result. You just have one cable. Usually the cable comes with the microphone, unless what you need is a longer cable because of your unique situation. You can just take the microphone cable that came with your USB mic and plug it straight into your laptop or your computer. Now, the arguments for an XLR mic are better circuitry, for one thing. Not because the mic has better circuitry, but because it doesn't have any circuitry to speak of. Instead, that job is handled by a box that specializes in that. Sometimes a fairly expensive box. It just depends on what you get. But in all cases, or in most cases, let's say, the circuitry will be more sophisticated and more robust than the little microchip circuitry that you'd find inside of a USB microphone. So the conversion from analog to digital is going to be very potentially cleaner, maybe freer of noise. Another argument for XLR mics is that that format supports the higher quality mics out there. You know, you're not going to find a lot of real high-end microphones that have the USB approach. Most of them will require an interface box. The argument for USB mics, well, for one thing, a lower entry point. You know, they just are not as expensive generally. There is no interface box required, so there's an additional savings there. There are no cables to buy. And if you're using an XLR mic, you at minimum will have a cable that runs from the microphone to the box and another one that runs from the box to the computer, though in some cases that will be a USB connection that, so that maybe the interface box will come with its USB cable. And also that USB mics are plug and play. There's less monkeying around. There's less connecting to do. There are fewer things to go wrong in a sense. There are fewer settings to mess with. If you have an interface box, you're maybe adjusting levels and you're doing some things with that. Now, let's talk about quality comparisons between the two. When it comes to digital to analog conversion, or analog to digital really, the XLR wins in most cases because the circuitry that is used in the box that interfaces your microphone to your computer is going to be more sophisticated. Signal to noise, the argument is that the signal to noise ratio is going to be generally lower when you're using a high-end box than with maybe less sophisticated circuitry that's going to be inside of a USB mic. So the XLR wins on that one. The quality of available mics, XLR wins again because generally the XLR mics tend to be, or let's flip that around and say the higher end mics tend to all be XLR. And when it comes to budget, the condenser wins hands down because not only are the mics less expensive, but you don't have the interface box to have to purchase. So that really brings us down to this. How noticeable is the difference between what you get from a USB mic and what you get from an XLR mic? Experts will make a strong case for the XLR. And if you are going to just take two microphones, plug them both into a computer, and listen to one and then listen to the other, maybe record both, same levels, saying the same thing at the same distance, pretty much trying to do everything apples to apples. Experts will tell you that by close inspection, side by side, the XLR will come out ahead. But the question in my mind is that going to be true of the client? And we're going to talk about that a little bit too. So this is really less about the analog to digital conversion in my mind and the signal noise ratio than it is about general microphone quality. Because if you were to take those two microphones, play them for the average person, not one right after the other, it's very possible that they'd hear the USB mic and go, that sounds good. They wouldn't necessarily notice those fine signal to noise ratio things and maybe the slight differences in clarity or definition in an XLR mic. But then again, the USB mics, because they're less expensive, sometimes don't have as good a pickups either, so there can be that as a comparison. So it has more to do with the quality of the microphone itself, in my mind, than it has to do with the digital analog conversion or with the what's the other one I was going to say, signal to noise ratio. Now, a few general thoughts, and I see we're getting lots of good comments here. I'll be addressing those afterwards, but if I look at them now, I'm going to get myself distracted. Some general thoughts. We are really looking at the difference between purists and pragmatists on this when making these distinctions. The purists are going to say it's got to be XLR. The pragmatists are going to say, well, it kind of depends on your budget. I tend to come in on the pragmatic side on this one. When you're starting out, Dane's opinion, I think a USB mic may very well suffice for your purposes. Odds are, as I mentioned, most customers won't detect a problem and will think it sounds fine. If you're working with real high-end customers, they're going to be a little tougher to please, but generally when you're starting out, you're not working with real high-end customers. Or if you are, it's not that often. And even if you are, in a lot of cases, they may still not really notice enough of a difference to make a point of it. So when you're starting out, when you're beginning, it is hard to justify more than a USB mic, especially if you're not really even sure if you're going to make it in voiceovers. You're not sure of your reception yet. Why go out and spend high amounts of money on a mic because someone in a group or someone on a video said, oh, this is a really great microphone, and if you want to be a professional, this is what you need. It's not a good place to start. USB mics also are closing the gap when it comes to quality. There is just not the same level of difference as there was even a few years ago. My first USB microphone that I purchased was a blue Snowball, which I still have. Beautiful looking thing, very interesting design. And I thought, okay, it's got nice clarity, but I didn't wasn't impressed with the tone of it. It was kind of tinny to my ear. And I even then people were saying, okay, but then Blue has other microphones and this one is better. And I listened to them and I went, okay, maybe it is a little better. But at that time, the USB mics that I heard, I was not terribly impressed with. I felt like, in a pinch, they probably could work. But that has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years, to the point now where USB mics are starting to get a lot more attention for the quality that they give you, especially for the price. With that in mind, I recently did, during my Gig Winners course, an interview with Bill DeWees. And once, I think already this month, I played this interview. But I'm going to play it again now because I think it really applies well to today's topic. What we're talking about, and Bill and I were having a nice conversation on, was the whole issue of USB mics and whether they can be, in a practical sense, used for voiceover. And then we spoke about one in particular because, compared with like the mic that I have here, it's like a 20th of the price of the mic I'm using. So let's listen to that video right now. Welcome to Fiverr Gold. I'm Dane Scott. I've done a lot of voiceovers over the years, and I've used a lot of mics before I settled on the Neumann TLM 103, which my voice really seems to do well through. But a newfound friend turned me on to a mic this week that, while it might not be Neumann's equal, it is certainly impressive at 1/20th the price. We'll do a shootout side by side next. While I was interviewing VO Pro Bill DeWees for an upcoming Udemy course called Gig Winner, a guide to creating a winning voiceover demo, Bill mentioned a mic he's pretty impressed by, especially for the price.
There's a new mic that just came out, and by the way, I don't get paid for saying this, so there's no financial incentive, but it's called a Fifine, F-I-F-I-N-E K670, and it's $50. I actually did a video, I did a review on my YouTube channel about it. I couldn't believe how great this thing sounded. And my son, who's an audio engineer, also reviewed it, and he was equally impressed. But the specs on it and the sound are outstanding.
Well, following the principle that you can never have too many microphones, and the fact that I actually did need an emergency backup mic, I ordered it, and it arrived today. I didn't waste any time trying it out, and thought I'd immediately do a test recording of it, and of my Neumann, and see how the two stacked up against each other. Unfair comparison? Probably, but I think you'll agree the Fifine held up pretty well. Briefly, I set up each mic at the traditional hand's breadth away. I chose one as the input source first and recorded some copy. Then I got at the same angle, the same distance from the other mic and recorded the same copy again. Here's what I got. First, here's the Fifine. The most significant event for the last 75 years that transformed and fueled manufacturing, agriculture, and the economy was World War II. The Great War finally ended, and the world was at peace. With the enemy defeated and the rebuilding of Europe at hand, the world felt a sense of security and prosperity. Now here's the Neumann. The most significant event for the last 75 years that transformed and fueled manufacturing, agriculture, and the economy was World War II. The Great War finally ended, and the world was at peace. With the enemy defeated and the rebuilding of Europe at hand, the world felt a sense of security and prosperity. As you can tell, the Fifine has a nice rich sound, matched the Neumann for noise floor, and could certainly be used for professional voiceovers. Would I take it over the Neumann? No, the sound isn't quite as refined and maybe has a little brassiness to it, but I think it's fair to say that if I were to fulfill orders for clients using the Fifine, I wouldn't hear any complaints. It's a very clean-sounding audio, a little bit of low-end beef to the sound, and the actual mic has a nice hefty feel to it. It comes with a weighty stand that holds it stably and even has a rubberized mat underneath to keep it from skidding around. And it has a standard mount, so that means you can screw it onto a boom-style mic stand, which you might prefer because the desk stand's stem isn't really very tall. All in all, though, a pretty huge bargain for under $50, and I think it's an easy pick for somebody who's just starting out in voiceovers. Join me along with an all-star cast of VO pros for the upcoming Udemy class, Gig Winner, the voiceover demo course, where we'll hear from Bill and all of these guests. And we don't spare you that right now. So there we go. Yay. We finally got the video to play. And now I know what to do for the future, and I won't make you sit through all of that messing around. But we did get it, so I'm happy about that. Grace under pressure. All right, so that is what I had to say about this this microphone topic, and I want to wrap it up like this. In my opinion, the guitar doesn't make the player. Back in around 1972, now I'm dating myself big time. I was like 10th grade. And I had been wanting to play the bass since I saw a guy up playing a bass in a concert, and I just thought, wow. And heard that beautiful sound of the bass playing through the speakers, and I just thought, the bass, I love the bass. And so we didn't have a bass guitar, but we did have an electric guitar, a 6-string electric guitar. And I happened to find out that the first 4 strings on an electric guitar are tuned the same, though an octave lower, than a bass. And so I used to practice playing the bass on the lower 4 strings of the guitar, even plucking it with my fingers the way you do on a bass. I think my dad finally felt sorry for me. And one day he arrived with this. He worked at Sears, and this is a Sears Silvertone bass. And I opened up the case, and I saw that beautiful sunburst, pick guard and all of that, and thought about what I'd been using up until then. This was clearly a very inexpensive instrument, though at the time I thought, man, I am in heaven. It was, I don't know what it cost, but it was probably not that much. We were not rich. But he got me that bass, and I'll tell you what, I played the daylights out of that bass. I practiced it and practiced it. I played it for years, despite a few little weaknesses that it had. I played it in bands. I played it in high school jazz band. I played it all over the place. I practiced it in my basement. I remember putting on records and playing along with the records. Learned a lot on that bass. Played it for years. It was cheap. But again, I don't think the guitar makes the player. And I mentioned, I think when we talked about this in an earlier session, Chet Atkins playing on, I think, a mandolin or a banjo that he had made where a couple of the strings were made from fence wire. So, Chet Atkins was about as good as he gets, but that's the way he started out. So, summing up, since then, I've moved to this, an NS fretless bass. This is my instrument these days, and it gives me a jazzier feel, and it's clearly much more of an instrument. It is to the Silvertone what the Neumann is to the Five-Fine. But the point is that either one is capable of making good music. And I would say the same thing of USB mics. Either one is capable of making good voiceovers. And what I did in terms of making my move from one instrument to the other was that as my skill justified it and as my budget justified it, I made the change. The same is true of mics. Developing your skill on something you can afford first is just wisdom, and then move up as your skills and your budgets allow. Recently, I discovered something that I want to just share with you, and I will be getting to comments here before we're done. But recently, I discovered something that just really shocked me. Now, this is related to Fiverr, and I know some of our people that are watching this are just voiceover people. They're not Fiverr people. But the principle behind what I discovered will actually carry over beyond Fiverr to any pay-for-play site, or even when you're doing your negotiations with people outside of pay-to-play sites. For example, when you're working directly with a client or an agency. What I discovered is something that it hadn't dawned on me in all these years of doing voiceovers, 45 years. And it was an immediate revelation. That's why I call it Newton's apple, because it kind of landed on my head with a thud, and it was like, whoa, what have I been not doing? And once that dawned on me, I started doing it, and I think the count as of today is $550 I've added to my income over the last 6 weeks by doing this one additional thing. It's valuable enough that I spent a whole good amount of time creating a video showing you what it's about, telling you what you have to do. And once you know it, you're going to be doing what I did. You'll be smacking yourself in the forehead and going, "Oh." So I really strongly suggest that you get this if you don't already have it. Go to thegigdoctor.com, and then you can just put a / and head slappers. Head slappers. So thegigdoctor.com / head slappers, and go down to number 4, the one I call Newton's Apple, and grab it. $49.95, you're going to make that back. I guarantee it. As a matter of fact, I'll give you your money back if you don't, but you will. And not only that, if you do decide you want a refund, I'll give you another head slapper for free. So that's another $49.95. All right, enough of a pitch on that. It's just that I put a lot of work into this, and I haven't had as many people take advantage of it yet as I had hoped. And it's kind of shocking. And the thing is, if you don't know, I mean, that's why I felt like I needed to kind of tell people, just let them know. This is one you want. So check it out, gigdoctor.com / head slappers. Thank you very much for today, and we'll be putting this up on YouTube the entire month. We'll be up for a little while, and then it may be coming down. So if you want to check out any of the archive, go to YouTube, do a search for MythBusters, Dane Scott. That should be enough to pull it up. That's going to do it for our live feed today, and we will be again running another one tomorrow and all the way through the end of the week, and I think that's going to wrap it up.